Okay. Welcome to the July 13th, 2020 CAC meeting. Good evening, attendees. As a reminder, all persons wishing to speak during public comment or to an item must complete a speaker slip online by visiting the public meetings page at ebce.org prior to the start of the meeting. For those that are calling in from a landline, please email your comments to cob@ecbe.org before the meeting. All speakers must sign up before the item is called. When the chair opens the discussion to public comment, please use the raise hand feature when your name is called. The clerk will unmute your microphone when it is your turn to speak. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. The chair may elect to shorten the time to allow time for more speakers. If you're calling in by phone, press #9 to use the raise hand feature. And with that, we can start the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. I know that we have at least 2 other members that we're expecting to show up tonight. So I might end up pushing the chair elections until they show. But let's go ahead and do roll call.
Okay. Member Eldridge? Member Frank?
Present.
Okay, Member Laundrie?
Present.
I think present.
You just unmuted me, thank you.
Yes, okay. Member O'Connell?
I'm here.
Member Pacheco?
Present.
Member Padilla?
Present.
And Chair Sutter?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So folks, I'm going to put it to you. Our second item is chair elections. And we have one person who is not present. Do you want to wait? Because I believe Anna Olivia is planning to show up. Does anybody know one way or the other? Nope. Should we go ahead and hold elections? We want to wait and do them later? And Stephanie or Adrian, I'll ask you, does it matter?
No, that's fine. You can take that out of order, however you'd like to do it. If you run the meeting, you would just run the full meeting, and then whoever's elected as chair and vice chair for the next meeting. If it's not you, we'll run the next meeting.
Okay. So folks, that's what I'm thinking of doing.
Yeah, I recommend we just wait and put it at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I also agree with that.
Great. Okay, so we move on to item C3, which is public comment. It is reserved for anybody who wants to address us on any related matter that is not on our current agenda. Adrian, do we have any speaker slips? I do see one hand raised.
We do have one speaker for public comment, Alita Dupree. Alita Dupree, I'm going to allow you to speak in just 1 second. I just need to pull up the timer. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Ready?
Yes, hold on. I'm having one small technical difficulty.
Okay.
Stephanie, can you unmute Alita, please?
Okay, Alita, you have access to your microphone.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Microphone is off again, Alita.
Alita, just a moment. Your microphone keeps going off. You shouldn't have to press anything on your end.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Sutter and members of the committee. Alita Dupree, for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you. I'm going to talk about general matters concerning EBCE. It's very hot out, so I really appreciate air conditioning. And I enjoy your virtual backgrounds. When I'm on Zoom with photo, I can often be seen in front of Grand Central Terminal, the world's largest railroad station in New York City, and it runs on electricity. So what are things I would like to see for EBCE? Certainly, increased emphasis on renewables, at the same time ensuring the value proposition. As much as I would like to see us operate entirely on renewables, we still need to ensure that there is a price point that is less than PG&E, because there's some who just, they can't afford to go any higher, and because electricity is commodity, many will say, well, why should I pay more when I can get it for less somewhere else? So we always have to make sure that we have a price point that is less than PG&E, because this is public power. We have a voice, and so we want to ensure that everybody has a bite at the apple here. And I believe in public power. I have had public power with 4 different utilities in my own name. No, I have been with 4 different utilities in my life under my own name. One of them was public, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. I would like to see us become more informational, because buying electricity through EBCE should be about developing relationships, both with our businesses and our residential customers, because with a relationship, we can empower people to use electricity more efficiently. Electricity is very basic, and equity is essential. No one should have to worry about being able to access electricity, and I appreciate the work that is being done in this crisis with the various deferral programs, especially when it's 100-something degrees outside. We don't want anybody getting shut off. So I'm looking forward to these presentations tonight. It's very, very important work, and I thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Is that our only person for public comment?
Yes, that's the only
Great.
person signed up for public comment.
Thank you. Anna Olivia, I see that you are now joined. Just for your edification, we have moved the chair elections C2 until later, probably last at this point, simply because we wanted to make sure that we had everybody here. So we were kind of waiting on you for that. But we'll move that later in the presentation. Let's move on to item C4, which is the approval of minutes from June 15th, 2050. I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain. So somebody else needs to bring this forward.
I wasn't here either, so I need to abstain as well. This is Monica.
Okay.
I was here, but I chaired the meeting. Can I still put forward a motion to approve?
Yeah.
Okay, motion to approve.
Seconded.
Any
Who seconded
objections?
I have some clarifications, please.
Okay.
I'm looking at the minutes. One, I did, it's under the CAC chair report. And I guess I can look it up, but I still would like clarification. This is on page 2, probably the top third. I had requested clarification about whether the April 20th, 2020 PG&E carbon-free allocation vote has a time limit. Well, yeah, I'd like to have, I guess I can look at the JPA minutes, but I actually would like to know how that motion was actually, made. I mean,
So just to clarify, Cynthia, the minutes don't say that you asked for that request, or the minutes don't?
Oh, yes, it does. C4,
okay, so
C4 under the CAC chair report.
Yeah.
Page 2, and I'm reading off the minutes. Actually, but you weren't there, so it was Vice Chair French that I made that request to last month. Because, yeah, so it's there.
Okay. I guess to me, the fact that you requested it doesn't necessarily mean that the answer is going to be in the notes unless the answer was discussed in that meeting.
Well, I guess, yeah, I don't recall any time limit to the motion. I'm going to go back. I will look at the JPA minutes. I said I was going to do that. There was a lot of reading this time, so I didn't go back, but I would like to. I will look that up and revisit it next month.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah. Are there any other clarifications that you have, Cynthia?
The notes, whoever took these notes were excellent. They were outstanding, except the last time my name was mentioned. It's a very minor thing. On page 3, it's, I used to be teased about my name. I used to be called Laundromat Has a Child. But anyways, my last name is spelled Landry, and I see there was a U added. So yep. That's the only minor. The other 2 times my name was mentioned, it was perfect, but I'm sorry. So. Yep,
that's okay. So with that one correction of the change of Member Landry's last name, I heard, who seconded it? Jane, who seconded that? I didn't hear.
Not sure who seconded.
I believe
that was me.
Yeah. Oh, Ernie.
Yes.
Ernie.
Okay.
So should I proceed with roll call vote?
Okay.
Okay. Member Eldridge?
Yes. We didn't hear you, Anna Olivia.
Very faint.
Should I come back to Member
Yes.
Eldridge? Member Franck?
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. That explains why you didn't hear me move approval earlier. Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Member Franck?
Yes.
Member Landry?
Yes.
Member O'Connell?
Yes.
And Member Pacheco?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Great. Thank you. Motions, minutes are approved. So we'll move on to item C5, which is the chair report. And my report today is about the board retreat that occurred on July 1st of this year. I don't know how many people were able to listen in on that. It was an extensive retreat, but really well done. And I actually personally found it fascinating. I would encourage anybody who's interested to go watch the video of that. It is online at this point. There were a couple items that I wanted to bring out that out of all of the detail that's presented in there, and there's an extensive amount of detail. There are a couple things that I think are interesting, and I wanted to make sure that the CAC heard about those. And one of those is a request for information that EBCE staff will be putting out shortly. Oh no, they have put it out, and so they're waiting for information back about long-term storage solutions. And so these are storage solutions beyond the 4-hour period that is typical, I think. They're looking at 8 and 12-hour storage solutions, which are things that are going to be needed in the future for resource adequacy. They're going to figure out what's out there, what their costs are. This information, once staff gets the RFI back, will be brought to the board. And so we will be hearing it as well, some point in the future. The other thing, this is a lot of it's around resource adequacy. And one of the things that I hadn't realized is that wind and solar account for less than 100% of their nameplate when EBCE is required to put into place certain amounts of resource adequacy. They have obligations or else they'll be fined. An example, solar is about 14.25% applicable. So if you put in a 100 megawatt station of solar, only 14.25 megawatts of that can be used for resource adequacy. So that's, I found that to be pretty interesting because I hadn't realized that. And there are different types of resource adequacy, which makes the purchase of power and ensuring that EBCE meets their obligations towards this pretty complex. The presentation does a nice job of it, and that's really all I'm going to say about it at this point. But that information is there, and hopefully people will take the time to go listen to it. And with that,
may I ask a question, please? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you saying that even though we would, and I'm just going to mean, even though we would like to expand our renewable portfolio, that there are limits in terms of the amount of renewable energy? Is that what you're alluding to? And
No, that's not what I'm alluding to.
Okay, so maybe you can.
The one thing I will say is purchasing power for an electric utility has many different obligations. One of them is resource adequacy. And I don't really want to get into all of that at this point. They do a really good job in this presentation. It is one thing that EBCE must do. And to purchase that power, solar is not a one-to-one purchase of power. So to meet their obligations, solar helps, sort of. It's kind of what it comes down to. And since this is not the forum for us to talk about it, I can definitely talk with you about this offline, Cynthia.
Okay, okay.
Also, I would suggest this is not my job to, I mean, in the sense that it's very complex and they go over it really well in that presentation, and I can pick up parts of it and I can present that to you. And we can definitely have a conversation about it. And then once you listen to it, then you'll go, oh, that's what she meant.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to item C6, which is the approval of the IRP study for the compliance filing. This is currently set as a CAC informational item, and mainly because I failed to, it was kind of put out as an informational item, but then I know the board's gonna vote on something here. I don't feel like we can move it to an action item at this point, so we're not gonna entertain motions, but we can definitely, I can provide information kind of in terms of what I'm hearing from the CAC in the meeting on Wednesday. So with that, do we have Marie or do we have Stephanie presenting to us tonight?
We're actually going to tag team it. So this is
Great.
Stephanie Tannenhouse, and I'm a principal regulatory analyst on EBCE's policy team. And I'll be kicking things off and then handing things over to Marie, who's really been leading this process to finish things up. So the presentation today is, as you can see, on EBCE's Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, compliance results. And we'll review the process that, well, some background on the IRP, and then the process that EBCE has gone through to get to this point where we're able to share the results of the compliance portion of the analysis. And then and with kind of the considerations of that and next steps. Moving to the next slide. Great. So as some background, the IRP filing is a requirement for all CPUC load serving entities. So in this case, similar to the resource adequacy rules that were mentioned, that include CCAs, as well as the utilities and direct access providers. So there's around 30 or so load serving entities that are all required on a biannual basis to submit an IRP to the CPUC. IRPs are a planning exercise. So each entity is looking out over a 10-year horizon and considering the load is forecasted to be, then they look at what additional resources should be procured and in what quantities in order to meet their load and different state policy requirements. And one of those requirements, which is kind of the big one in the CPUC's process, is a specific greenhouse gas emissions target that's assigned to us, and we have to meet that by 2030. So this is the only the second time the CPUC and EBCE are going through this process, and there have been a number of changes since the first cycle. So our first IRP was completed in 2018, and both EBCE and the CPUC have made some changes since then, which we'll talk about. In this cycle, we are taking a phased approach to our IRP. So the first phase, which we're sharing the results of today, is the completion of the required analysis for what EBCE is filing, and that's due September 1st at the Commission. And in order to meet the Commission standards for what qualifies as, it's called a conforming plan, we have to use the Commission's inputs and assumptions in our own analysis. So we kind of have limited freedom in terms of the information that we're using to develop these portfolios. And there are also very specific requirements that these portfolios have to meet. So some of those requirements are, which specific resources we can consider in terms of what we're selecting to fill our portfolio, as well as our projected annual load amounts and the hourly load shapes. So those are kind of things that are standardized for the compliance filing that we can't make adjustments to. In addition to that, there are 3 required documents that must be completed and filed with the CPUC, which they will use to evaluate our IRP. So the Commission releases templates for those documents, and then we populate those templates and submit that on September 1st. One of those is a narrative that it will describe our methodology and the process, and a qualitative consideration of various issues that the Commission has brought forth in that narrative. And then the other 2 are quantitative spreadsheets that we will populate. And so one of those, the resource data template, includes a comprehensive look at all of the resources currently in EBCE's portfolio, as well as our planned and new resources. And then the second spreadsheet document is called the Clean System Power Calculator. It's going by a different name as last cycle, but essentially that calculates the expected greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with our portfolio. So the Commission uses that tool to basically validate that we have met the greenhouse gas requirement of the compliance filing. And the first workbook that I mentioned, the resource data workbook, is used by the Commission to look across all of the different IRPs that are being filed, aggregate them up, and build them into a comprehensive kind of system-wide picture. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 will include additional analysis, and in that phase we'll be revising many of the inputs and assumptions to better align with our best view of the world, and we'll also be exploring a range of different scenarios and sensitivities that can help us look at different trade-offs and make informed decisions about our procurement recommendations. So this is that phase 2 is really more internal and a more strategic analysis that will help us answer some organizational questions as compared to the more out of the box compliance filing of phase 1. Next slide. Oh, great. Thank you. So I mentioned the CPUC has changed its requirements, not only from the last cycle to this cycle, but several times during this cycle. And so consequently, there have been multiple delays. The filing is usually due May 1st, and it's been pushed out to September 1st. In its latest guidance to LLCs, we are required to submit 2 portfolios rather than 1 portfolio. And so each of those portfolios represents 2 different greenhouse gas target scenarios. So the targets that are assigned to each entity are representative of their proportional share of statewide electric sector emissions. So the 2 statewide scenarios for emissions that the CPUC has considered in the cycle are a 46 million metric ton and a 38 million metric ton scenario. So that again would be, all of the electric sector emissions for the entire state of California in 2030. The 46 million metric ton is what the CPUC is calling its reference system plan. So that's kind of the main reference scenario. And then we've been asked to file an additional lower emission scenario that meets a 38 million metric ton target. And that was in response to a number of stakeholders who were wanting the state to look at something that was a little bit more ambitious than 46. So this yellow highlighted row is the EBCE specific numbers. So you can see what our load is in 2030 compared to all of PG&E's bundled load. And then our emissions targets, which are in the last 2 columns, are taking what that load, proportional load share is of the statewide emissions target and assigning that to EBCE. And just for reference here, because I know these numbers might be a little hard to understand without context, our forecasted 2020 emissions for a slightly different, slightly lower load, I think it's more like 6,000 gigawatt hours instead of the 7,000 we're projecting in 2030. That is around 0.97 million metric tons. So you can see that that 46 MMT scenario isn't hugely ambitious. We can move to the next slide. This is the framework that we're using to draw comparisons and highlight different trade-offs between the scenarios that we're looking at. So scenarios 1 and 2 here correspond to those compliance cases that we'll be submitting September 1. And scenario 3, which has yet to be completed, is the internal scenario that will use more of our own inputs and assumptions and evaluate a more ambitious greenhouse gas target. So as we look down the rows here, these are kind of the key metrics that we'll look at in the different portfolios. Obviously, we want to know what portion of the portfolio is greenhouse gas free, and how to what degree that varies across the different scenarios. We want to look at what the cost is and affordability, as well as what the resource mix is made up of and the portion of new build that is required to meet those greenhouse gas targets versus relying on existing resources. Risk management covers a number of different areas that will look at what portion of long-term contracts EBCE would enter into under that scenario. What types of resources should be included. For example, tying back to the solar question, we don't want too much solar because that can really increase the number of hours when we're exposing ourselves to market risk during the times when the sun isn't shining. And finally, reliability. So this is, looking at the amounts of resources in our portfolios, and then for each technology, as Mary mentioned, the RA contribution doesn't match up exactly with what the total capacity is. So taking that into account, how much of the portfolio, how much RA contribution is there given the different resource mixes in each of those portfolios, and is that meeting the reliability standards that are set by the CPUC? We can move to the next slide. Great. So I've talked about how these compliance conforming portfolios are relatively prescriptive in terms of what inputs and assumptions we are allowed to use. And really that's because the CPUC is looking for consistency across all of the different IRPs that are submitted by LSEs. So that allows them to make comparisons across LSEs, and it also allows them to aggregate up the individual plans that are being filed to equal a more comprehensive view of what the system would look like under a 46 and a 38 million metric ton scenario. So they're based on the CPUC's view of what resources are going to be available and when, what our load will look like, and those assumptions aren't necessarily going to line up with what we think is going to happen. So that kind of speaks to the limitations on the right. The CPUC's guidance isn't going to always meet what we expect. It's not tied to what our individual organizational goals are or our views of the market. And so because we want our analysis to best reflect those views, when we enter phase 2, we're really going to be putting in our best opinions on those. And that's going to mean that when you look across the compliance and compare those to the EBCE scenarios, there's going to be some variations in what the assumptions are between those cases. So they're not going to be completely uniform, but we'll be able to speak to those differences and what the implications are. Move to the next slide. All right, so these are the actual results of the conforming portfolios. So this, they're a tabular representation of all of the different resource types that would make up EBCE's portfolio in different years. And these years are selected by the commission. So that's why they're the years that they are. And so the 2030 column is really the most important, because that's the year that the CPUC is going to look at and check whether we meet the greenhouse gas requirement and also the reliability standards that they're looking for. So the resources that you see here have been determined by the CPUC, and our process was really to start with our existing portfolio, and that includes hundreds of megawatts of renewables and storage that will be coming online over the next few years. And then we took that existing portfolio and then built that up to include our proportional share of what the CPUC's reference plan was. So before individual entities develop their plans, the CPUC does this system-wide look, and they come up with a portfolio for the whole ISO footprint, basically. And then that is basically what is, what guides the development of our portfolio. So after we've applied that proportional share, then we look at what amounts that equals for these different resource types, and we make adjustments that in this case are actually allowable by the CPUC, but those adjustments represent our organizational and customer preferences and staff's knowledge of what the electric system and resource availability it is. So some of those adjustments are that we wouldn't be directly accepting any energy from nuclear or natural gas facilities. And we've also derated the amount of both in-state and out-of-state large hydro, given the limitations in-state and for both in and out-of-state. There's a lot of appetite for contracting with those resources. And so we don't expect to be able to meet that full proportional share.
Hey, Stephanie, quick question. What are the units on those numbers?
Yeah, so these are megawatts. So this is the capacity of the different resource types. Sorry, that should have been noted here.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is Monica. I had a quick question too. I had my hand raised, but I don't know if you want questions at the end or as you go through your presentation.
Let's go ahead and wait till we're done. The other thing being is, Stephanie, kind of unlike the board, we try and keep to our time limits, and we have 45 minutes for this section. So maybe you can think about that, and we have about 20 minutes left.
Okay,
so,
absolutely. I will move things forward. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And then, because we do want time at the end. So I'd like for her to get through it all, Monica, but this was one, because she was talking about it, it seemed useful to know what the units were. So thanks.
Definitely. So I'll just highlight a couple quick things here. I know there are a lot of numbers on this slide. If you look at the amounts of battery storage, while they're somewhat similar between the 46 million metric ton scenario on the left and the 38 million metric ton scenario on the right, for the 38 million metric ton, we have a much higher proportion of 4-hour battery storage. So that, expands the energy capacity that is available for storage to charge from, most likely excess solar that's being generated during the day, and then shift that energy towards the evening when the sun is set and there's that increased need to meet our load. The other thing I'll highlight, so the areas where there is a lot of new capacity added are wind and solar. There's a number of different types of wind and solar resources. Again, these are provided by the CPUC and represent different regions of those resources. But that's where the majority of the capacity is being added in our portfolios. Great. We can move to the next slide. And the next couple of slides are focusing on the mix of long-term contracted resources in each portfolio. So the pie charts show the different portions of each resource type that are in our long-term portfolio in 2030. And then the bar charts on the bottom show the numbers of megawatts of capacity of each resource type in each of the selected years. So there's a very similar mix across both scenarios, just with the lower GHG scenario on the right is going to require greater amounts of renewable capacity to meet that lower GHG target. And we can move to the next slide. And this is similar, but is a view of the 2030 resource mix in terms of the energy provided. So the biggest change here is that there's no storage. Storage doesn't generate any energy, it can just move it around. And then the other thing to note is that on an energy basis, some resources are going to represent a greater relative share than when you look at their capacity. And this again speaks to the conversation at the beginning of the meeting, but this is because each resource type has a different generation profile. So a megawatt of one type of renewable doesn't necessarily equal a megawatt of another type of renewable in terms of the amount of generation. So geothermal, for example, looks like a much larger slice on an energy basis, and that's because on average it's going to generate more consistently and at a higher capacity factor than a resource like solar. So with that, I can hand things over to Marie to cover the last few slides.
Thanks, Stephanie. Adrian, will you go? Oh, perfect. So we have a couple slides just to talk about the costs of these two draft portfolios. And the thing that I really want to emphasize is the expected costs associated with the portfolios are a result of the assumptions that are made by the CPUC related to what the costs of resources will be over time and what the costs of different things that sort of drive prices in the energy market will be. We kept with the CPUC's cost assumptions, which were, the CPUC used two sources, an NREL study and a study put out by an organization called Lazard. And these studies came out in 2018. Between 2018 and today, a lot of things have changed. COVID, for one. People have probably noticed that gasoline prices have come down considerably. Natural gas prices have also come down considerably. So while it was, for study purposes, it was reasonable for us to use CPUC cost assumptions for the compliance filing, I just want to caveat and say that we don't actually agree with a lot of them. The world has changed just in the last 2 years. So, based on that, I will point out that the average cost per megawatt hour of demand associated with each of these two portfolios is in this, is in this bottom table here. The 38 million metric ton portfolio is forecasted to cost us $75 per megawatt hour of demand on average over the course of the 10 years of this study time frame. If we were to go with the 46 million metric ton scenario, the average forecasted cost over the 10 years is just under $74 per megawatt hour. So the 38 million metric ton scenario gets us cleaner energy and more of it, and it also costs more. And then the table, or the bar chart on the top right, gives a graphical representation of what we think the value of the resources will be on average over their 10-year lifetimes. So what we're looking at basically is that based on market dynamics, we estimate that in the 46 million metric ton scenario, geothermal will be a negative revenue stream to us. It doesn't mean that it's not still valuable. It's just that the cost of paying for these resources in relation to the value that they can obtain in the energy market makes it an out of the money resource. Notably, in the 38 million metric ton scenario, wind is forecasted to be of negative revenue value to us over this 10-year lifetime. Can we go forward to the next slide? Whereas the bottom table on the previous slide looked at cost per megawatt hour of load on average over 10 years, this table looks at what is the average annual cost of each portfolio. So the 38 million metric ton portfolio, based on the cost assumptions, is forecasted to cost us on average $516 million per year. That doesn't mean it will be $516 every year. That's the average. So some years will be a little lower, some will be a little higher, but that's the annual average cost of the portfolios. And then the top graph is the top graphs are breaking down by 46 and 38 million metric ton portfolio, what the costs and revenue streams are associated with each resource type. So you can see, you know, on the last slide, we saw that in the 46 million metric ton scenario, it looked like solar was on average of value to us. That's represented as the yellow portion of the bars in the left box on these graphs. And so yes, solar is valuable. It's just that there are all of these other costs that stack up. So even if we're paying a lot of money to have these specific generating resources, there are still other costs that stack up that make the portfolio cost as much as it does in its entirety.
So, sorry, Marie, can I just ask, this is Rick O'Connell, can I just ask a question?
Please.
When you keep saying load here, so that's just, you're buying system, you're just buying
Rick,
brown, that's
Rick,
brown power?
Can you please hold until the end? Because I asked Monica to as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just trying to make a clarifying question because I don't understand what load means in this, but I can hold that question.
Okay, I would say that it's the cost of serving our demand. The demand of our customers. And let's see, next slide. So the next steps in this process, we'll be presenting these results to the board this Wednesday night. As Stephanie described, we've taken sort of a two-step process to the IRP study. The first step being to complete the compliance filing and then get the analysis and the results approved by the board of directors, file in time for the September 1st filing requirement. And then, well, actually at the same time, we're kicking off the supplemental study that will be used to inform our organization's goals around more aggressive greenhouse gas reduction. And so on Wednesday, rather than presenting two things. Number one, rather than presenting the board with hundreds of pages of spreadsheets with lots of numbers on it and asking for permission to file those spreadsheets, we're asking the board to approve the analysis that we've done around it and then delegate the responsibility to actually look at the numbers, make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, to delegate that responsibility to our CEO. Secondly, and candidly, we really need more time to finish filling out all of these spreadsheets. All of the CPUC requirement changes forced some restarts on our side. And so to get the analysis done in time to present to the board in July meant, since there's no August meeting, meant that we focused on getting the analysis done and not actually filling out the templates yet. Now that we've completed the analysis, we're in the process of filling out the templates. I think that effectively wraps it up. Rick, did I answer your question, or do you?
Marie, what I'd like to do is go to Monica first, and then we'll go from Monica to Rick, and then I'd like to be able to figure out how I can see everybody if they have hands up. So Monica, and then Rick.
I'll ask the question of Marie first and then Stephanie. So or maybe Stephanie can answer both or Marie can answer both. I'm curious, of these two portfolios that you're submitting, which one best reflects what EBCE actually intends to do or is planning to do, given the recent change in policy to basically track PG&E on carbon free? And then my second question has to do with slide 6 on the candidate wind resources. How were those resources picked, or are they just out of the CPUC's kind of suggested resources, or are these actual ones that you're considering, that EBC is considering?
Monica, let me speak to the first question, and then
sure.
Marie, if you want to speak to the second.
Sure.
Monica, I think we're really not at a point to say, like, is it the 46 or the 38? Actually, that's why we plan to conduct a an analysis looking at a 30 MMT scenario as well. Unfortunately, the PUC has provided very limited opportunity to sort of deviate from their values. I think one of the other challenges that Marie highlights is the cost assumptions are sort of outside of what we believe the actual costs are likely to be. So it's hard for us to say, well, we're going to do the 38 and not the 46 if the underlying assumptions around what the costs are going to be are in our view not accurate. I think generally speaking, we want to go as deep as we can in the carbon reductions. And, can you go to the cost slide, please? I think it's the second to last slide or third to last slide. Okay. So, okay, back one. Oh, this is fine. So think about that. This is fine. You have less than a $10 million net cost differential across 38 versus 46. So, that's net costs over 10 years. I mean, it's effectively the same, right? So I think what this modeling would tell you is you should absolutely go to the 38 MMT scenario because the cost differentials are just not that much different. And so I think we want to look at the 30 MMT scenario and see what those net cost differences are. And if the net cost differences tend to be sort of in line, then you're going to guide towards that 30 MMT scenario.
So the decision that the board made to track the carbon-free content to PG&Es, that's not a portfolio that you would consider modeling? The
PG&E, I think the challenge here is we don't know what PG&E's portfolio in 2030 is going to be. So is PG&E going to track to 46 or 38 or something else? The board decision is really in reference to the very short term.
Oh, okay. I didn't get that from the policy. I thought it was basically that's your forever plan. But I see what you're saying. You're going to do the analysis and then come back with kind of a game plan.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Mom,
And
did you get questions?
Yeah, the other question just had to do with what are those candidate resources? Are they ones that EBCE is considering, or are they just generic out of the resolve model?
They're effectively just generic out of the model.
Okay. Thank you.
So Rick and then Anna Olivia.
Yeah, so I guess my question was, I managed to figure out the answer, and I was actually going to make the same point that Nick just made, which is the difference. So the difference between these two portfolios is really just 2%, less than 2%. So because the way I guess I understand this is on the 38 million metric tons portfolio, you're purchasing more long-term, where EBCE would purchase more long-term contracts. So you'd be reliant on the spot market for less, and that's why the risk premium is lower. And your RA contracts are lower because you've actually contracted for more energy resources. So even though you're buying more energy, you're getting a lower risk and lower RA. So that's why they're almost identical in terms of total cost. And there's obviously some uncertainty built into these numbers, right? So hence the risk premium. So that helps me understand. And so I guess the other thing I sort of found in the notes was that the 38 million tons is about 2/3 of your energy is contracted and 1/3 is spot. And then in the 46 portfolio, it's about 60% is contracted and the rest is spot. So that's short term and a mix of short term and spot like contract.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, we don't think that presenting a portfolio to the commission where we said we're going to fill 1/3 of our open position just through the CAISO market. We don't think that really says reliable portfolio. And we wouldn't actually want to expose that much of our demand to price fluctuations in the spot market. But in theory, up to that much would not be hedged by a long-term contract. So in theory, it could be exposed to the spot market, but we would probably execute short-term contracts to fill those positions, some portion of those positions.
And then just one small question, when you were talked about wind as having kind of a negative, in other words, you're saying that, I guess what you were saying was that like you do a PPA for wind at 3 cents, but it's only got 2 cents of system value. And that's the case even given that wind has higher RA credit. So that's including the RA value of the wind, or is that just an energy value that you're?
We do see currently that wind resources, the contract price of a wind resource is substantially more than the contract price of a solar resource. And so although there are benefits to the fact that it generates at times of day when solar may not be available, and the fact that it has additional RA value, models indicate that it still tends to be an out of the money resource.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Anne Olivia, and then Jane.
Thank you. I really would like to thank staff for that presentation. Both of you did a fantastic job. It was really clear. It was really thorough. I was also going to make the point that Nick and Rick just did. I did have one other question, and it was, I also want to support staff in seeking authority to present the analysis and have that authority delegated to our staff. I will add that as we don't have a meeting in August, it doesn't actually preclude us from participating in a public input process that would not slow down staff. So in a lot of environmental and energy contracts that are done, you can do a posting online and then have a public comment period that would allow for input and the transparency that as an agency we've always strived for, but not actually hinder your ability to execute what's happening. So if perhaps a thing to examine would include when you have had time to complete your analysis, because it is absolutely understandable that you would not have completed it by now, that there is a posting and a public comment period, and then whatever is eventually filed gets brought back, even if it's after you've already filed it, right? But just so there is that opportunity for public engagement and posting. And again, that was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anne Olivia. Jane, and then Cynthia.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, staff. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's really surprising and encouraging to see that there's such a small delta between the two scenarios. I did have a question about the 38 scenario, because in one of the early slides, one of the just simplified graphics around it was that there was increased investment in infrastructure. And then looking at the annual delta, it actually doesn't seem that large. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about what that, would that, the difference between that 516 annual spend, and I think it was 507 annual spend, does that capture infrastructure investment? And if so, what kind of infrastructure? Is that going to be landing in Alameda County in the form of, increased storage capacity, increased resource adequacy within Alameda County itself, and investment opportunities within Alameda County itself? And if so, is there a way to kind of capture that and present that? Because that seems like also a distinguishing benefit of moving towards that 38 MMT scenario.
I'm gonna respond to this, but I recognize that I might not be fully capturing all of your question. So please let me know what portions I'm missing. So if we don't have to move back on the slides, but if we were to go back to the slide that had the tabular representation of which resources we're contracting with, we used the CPUC modeled locations for resources, and Alameda County was not on the list. So these numbers don't actually assume any resources are developed in Alameda County. By no means does that mean that there wouldn't actually be resources developed in Alameda County. It's just that wasn't part of the CPUC prescriptive list of where they expect resources will be. And that, I feel like I'm missing part of the question though.
So like, I mean, with the 38 MMT scenario, there was a much higher investment in extended battery. That, for example, like the solar plus storage piece, would that be within the EBCE ratepayer area? Therefore have an additional, economic advantage, to us here as EBC ratepayers.
Yeah. I can't commit to the location where resources might be developed, but what I can, the CPUC put together a list of regions where they expect there to be resource development, because using solar as an example, we know it tends to be sunnier in the desert than it is in the Bay Area. So there's going to be a lot more solar developed in the desert than there is in the Bay Area. We absolutely are aware of, and we share the goal of developing resources in Alameda County, so that that will continue to be something that we prioritize. The locations that are forecasted here are not don't bind us in any way. I would encourage looking at this more as like targets for volumes of types of resources. And then I would say to be that my best inclination is that we will not be able to develop a huge volume of solar resources in Alameda County due to the fact that it's not as sunny here and simply space concerns. I think that there are a lot more opportunities to develop energy storage resources in Alameda County. But when there are generating resources developed in Alameda County, we absolutely look at them and engage with developers in a very active way.
Thank you.
I think that you're muted, Mary.
Cynthia's next, and then I'd like to know if if we have any public comment lined up. Cynthia?
Yes. Hello. You can hear me, I guess.
Yes.
It's a kind of a follow-up to the previous question. It sounds like wind and solar, they're not, can you explain that again? They're not, you said a negative, I think you said, something negative value on wind and solar, and I think, can you explain that more? I'm sorry, because, and then if we're not using wind and solar, what would we be using? I'm sorry that my question is so basic, please.
When the reference to negative value, was it when I was talking about revenues perhaps, and how certain resources, I think certain resources we're forecasting will add positive revenues to EBCE, and other resources will be a negative revenue source. Maybe Adrian, could we take a look at slide 9 or 10? So again, oh yeah, no problem. I'm gonna answer the question as I understand it, but please redirect me. So the analysis indicates that solar, on this slide, solar looks negative, but the yellow portion of the bars looks negative, but that's because this slide is measuring cost. And so solar, because it would be a revenue source to us, appears negative, which means that the cost that we pay for the contract and then the value that we recoup from that resource generating in the energy market is forecasted to be greater than the contract price. So it would be a positive source of revenue. A wind resource, however, the price of wind is more expensive than the price of solar, and so it is not forecasted in most cases, or on average over time, that wind would be as valuable to us as a solar resource would be, because the wind is so much more expensive. And then there are other resource types that we are looking at, geothermal resources. So that's electricity generated from steam turning a turbine because of hot heat that comes out of the ground. Hydro resources, and potentially biomass. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat.
Can I take a quick crack at trying to answer that? I mean, I think this is actually a really good question, Cynthia, because it's really hard. I mean, I struggle to understand it a little bit too, but I think,
Thank you.
and Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially we've got a marketplace for energy in the state, the CAISO energy marketplace. And when we buy, let's say we buy like a wind power for 20 years from a specific wind farm, and we pay 5 cents a kilowatt hour for that wind farm contract, we could resell it in the CAISO marketplace for only 4 cents. So we're like actually kind of losing money. And I think that's what Marie is saying so the price of wind that we buy it for 20 years in a fixed contract is actually higher than what we could sell it for in like kind of the spot market or the CAISO market. Marie, am I getting that right?
That is exactly what I'm trying to describe. I'm not sure that was answering the question that Cynthia was asking.
Well, that's helping to answer the question. Okay. I'll just leave it at that, and I will be listening in on Wednesday again. That's fine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Adrian, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. We have one public comment from Alita Dupree. I am unmuting Alita.
Thank you, Chair Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. This is obviously very complicated, but important. As I look at this from the 30,000-foot level, I certainly think that we should recommend to our board to be more aggressive stance on a 38 million ton goal, because the urgency is there for us to reduce our emissions and set a statewide example. Obviously, the hedging and balancing is very complicated, and I don't want us to be overly reliant on the spot market. Sometimes I see wild fluctuations in prices. I'll see prices go negative due to congestion. And then sometimes I'll see prices go up into the hundreds of dollars per megawatt hour in the evenings on a hot day. And that gets scary, and that can bankrupt a utility in short order. So to go before the board, let's be aggressive about this 38 million ton plan, because with more renewables, we can certainly be more resilient. We obviously don't want to have too much solar, and then we pay for something that has to be curtailed. And certainly I would advocate for us to have more wind at nighttime so we can have a sense of balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. I have one question as follow-up, and then we're going to move on to our next item, because I know that's another long item as well. My question to staff is, I know last year was kind of the first time EBCE went through the IRP process, or 2 years ago perhaps, and I think there was some back and forth. So the question I have is, I don't understand if what we put in were held too tightly, or if you're putting in 3 scenarios, CPUC or CEC, I guess, says, hey, we are going to take scenario 2, and then we're stuck with scenario 2, or we're going to take scenario 3. I mean, how do those different scenarios play out in terms of the options for EBCE after this plan goes in?
I'd like to take a first stab at it, but I think Stephanie will have a really valuable perspective to add also. So the IRP process is currently an every other year filing. The plan filing is an every other year filing. It might actually move to every 3 years. But we will do this analysis and indicate what plan we think we're going to be moving towards. Between now and 2 years from now, and certainly 10 years from now, there are many things that can happen that can make us deviate from our plan. You know, if we thought we were going to execute, you know, half of our portfolio worth of solar contracts, and then something happened and they became way more expensive, we are not bound to executing a portfolio with half of our that's half filled with solar contracts. So we do have flexibility. It's meant to be an indication of the type of procurement that we're going to do, but it is not an obligation to do that type of procurement.
Great.
Stephanie, did you have anything to add?
I mean, I would echo everything you just said. I would say the CPUC's primary concern right now is about reliability. So they're going to look at the different plans and try to make an assessment of whether in aggregate, the plans are going to meet the reliability requirements for the state. And if not, then they may order more mandatory procurement based on those results. So ultimately, the CPUC has to decide which scenario they want to believe, whether that's 46 or 38. And then there is the potential for additional procurement to be mandated to different entities based on that. But separate from that, EBCE has a lot more freedom and flexibility to make our own procurement decisions. And like Marie said, these are our plans. We're not bound to the specific amounts of different resources. And so there is flexibility over the coming years to make adjustments in terms of what the portfolio is made up of.
Great, thank you. Thank you all, Marie, Stephanie, very, very good presentation. Let's move on to item C7. C7 is the local development update. And there's a lot on this one as well. There were a lot of slides on this one. So we're hoping to keep this one as short as possible. So go for it. Thanks.
All right, thanks all. So this is JP, and I'll be walking through our slide deck tonight. We can go to the next slide, Adrian. Mary, I will try to make it brief. The slide deck itself is a summary and does not include all of the activities that we have going. Those are all listed in the staff report that was submitted. So we did truncate it a little bit, but recognize there's still a lot here. So definitely encourage folks to dive in. And there's a few slides and a few programs that we have recently discussed at the board meeting. And so probably gloss over those a little quicker in light of time. So wanted to show the CAC where we are now with our budget and programs to date. So this slide is a cumulative slide for the last year's budget, FY20, and then next year's budget, FY21. So last year's budget was originally approved at 6.34 million, and then $500,000 was added for the medical baseline program, bringing it up to 6.84. And then this year's approved budget was 6.34 million. So the total on those two ends up being about 13,180. So far we have committed or spent about $5.5 million through the different program areas, and we'll go through a lot of those programs and initiatives in the following slides. Certainly the kind of large outstanding planned activity is the electric vehicle incentive program that was approved by the board. So that's that $6.1 million. It's not all for EVIP, but the $4 million allocation for EVIP sits within that. The rest is for fleet electrification and medium and heavy duty work. Again, we'll be going over that. And so we are planning to spend that, but since we haven't gotten confirmation yet from the CEC about EBCE being awarded that grant, obviously we haven't kind of committed it yet. A couple other things to highlight in this budget, the $1.25 million COVID relief activity that we kind of pulled from other program areas when COVID hit, and we've since put that money kind of back into the economy through a series of grants and activities as one thing to call out. And then the note that we kind of consolidated some of our program activities into this resilience bucket, which is really using kind of the program areas in the original LDBP that were collaborative procurement and enhanced NEM, because we're really trying to develop solar and batteries to create resilience in the community. So that's kind of the budget highlight. We're moving pretty well on getting these dollars into the community, and we'll be talking about the programs as we go forward. So next slide, please. So we wanted to talk about how our local development funds are really leveraging a lot of external dollars into the economy, which we're quite excited about, and that stimulates job creation and investments and economic activity throughout the county. So our programs, like the example of the electric vehicle incentive program, our heat pump hot water heater incentives, and the resilience program, as well as energy efficiency, really leverages a lot of money into the economy, not just EBCE's dollars, but there is public money like the California Energy Commission grants for electric vehicles, which we will bring into the county, as well as private capital. So for example, when we provide $1,000 for a heat pump hot water heater, we also get another $1,000 from Bayren, who has some public money for heat pump hot water heaters. And then there's the customer's investment in their home in the form of their payment towards their hot water heater. So our $1,000 gets leveraged up to be a much larger investment into the local economy. And so we've done some review of the kind of dollars and investments that are brought into these different services and appliances listed above. And for the $20 million that EBCE is investing in incentives and energy efficiency and our resilience program, we'll be leveraging over $160 million in investment, total investment over the next 4 years. So it's over a 7x, leveraging of external dollars, private and public, that we're bringing into the economy. And then, similarly, we don't account for our utility scale procurement in the local development budget, but did want to highlight that the work that Marie's team does in procurement has resulted in Alameda County projects being developed, the Summit Wind Project, the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative, and those utility scale projects also deliver a burst of activity, mostly in jobs, in construction jobs in the early years. And those projects are, have contracted values in cumulative over $180 million. So a lot of that money, is coming into the local economy in the form of jobs. There's obviously also hardware, and some of that money is not going to end up in Alameda County, but a lot of it does, and then also results in longer term O&M jobs as well, though the majority of jobs from utility scale projects really do accrue in the early years, and we have labor agreements for all those utility scale contracts as well to require workforce development and local jobs and prevailing wage. So really wanted to highlight kind of the benefits of our investment and how it brings other dollars into the economy. Next slide, please. So we're going to start working through our programs now. So one that's new and kind of we're still working on developing it is our Connected Communities pilot. So EBC has several zip codes with very high disconnection rates between 10 and 15%. Thankfully, disconnections have been suspended during COVID-19, but that's not permanent. And so we, before COVID-19 and are now continuing to work on a program to understand why and how customers are challenged paying their bills, why they're getting disconnected. And we want to really work on how to minimize arrears and the threat of disconnection for our most vulnerable customers. So there's some parts of this activity that we have suspended because of COVID-19, and that's providing some relief to those customers, but the threat and the challenge is not going away. So we have done some work to build a disconnections prediction tool, which Taj and Kevin and Diego have built, and we're refining that to see if we can, using our data, identify which customers are likely to not be paying their bills or get disconnected. So we're continuing to refine that. We're also going to be completing some focus groups with care customers and customers who've been in arrears to talk with them about the challenges they face in paying their bills and work through some solutions and interventions that EBCE may provide to limit potential for disconnection. And then we'll be testing some different interventions to see how that helps customers who have had challenges paying their bills, pay their bills into the future. So really excited to get this program kicked off. Next slide, please. So one solution for disconnections is the DAC Green Tariff and Community Solar Green Tariff program. EBC has been granted about 7 megawatts of solar capacity through this program, which will deliver a 20% discount to care rates. And care is already a 30% discount. That 7 megawatts or so will give us the ability to provide that 20% discount to about 2,500 care customers. So we have been progressing that over the last couple of quarters and planning to file our advice letter at the end of July or August. So getting that in, and then we will be issuing a solicitation to develop this 7 megawatts, 6.7 megawatts of solar, issuing that solicitation by Q1 of next year based on getting the approval from the PUC. And then once we build those solar projects, we'll be able to enroll customers and start giving them discounts on their bills. And we are certainly looking at how we might use this program as one of the interventions in our Disconnected Communities pilot to see if an additional discount to care can help some of our most impacted customers in avoiding arrears and disconnections. And then we're also looking at how we can enroll Tracy and Newark, which both have disadvantaged communities, into our program. Next slide, please. So we've just issued our first pay for performance solicitation for a residential low-income energy efficiency program. Got bids back last week and have started to go through the evaluation process on those. So we'll be using the data that we have on customers' interval data, and we've run that through the Recurve, which is a local company. Recurve's energy efficiency analysis platform to identify which customers can benefit the most from targeted energy efficiency and flexible load. So the picture on the right here is an analysis in the recurve tool, which allows us to isolate a certain target population of care customers who have very high afternoon load, and that's the most expensive energy to procure. It's also the most expensive energy for a customer to buy. And so the hypothesis here is that if you are able to reach out to the customers who stand to benefit the most from energy efficiency or changing the time of day where they're using energy, then they'll save the most money. And when we can target that at care customers or customers who are having problem paying their bills, then the benefits are exponential. So we're really excited to kick that off, and we will be also launching another residential and commercial pay-for-performance energy efficiency program, leveraging some other activities in the Bay Area over the next quarter. So starting to move forward on delivering, EBCE's version of energy efficiency programs to our customers. Next slide. So one element that we are also excited to do is augment our budget with state dollars. So we're piloting our initial pay for performance programs, and also looking at applying to the PUC for funding from ratepayer public purpose charges. So we have the authority to either apply to administer, which is what MCE has done to be a program administrator, or we can also elect to administer energy efficiency dollars, which means that we get a slightly smaller pot of money, but have quite a bit more flexibility in how we use those funds. And our estimate is that the elect to administer approach could deliver about $5 million a year in energy efficiency funds that we could use. And so we are planning to file an elect to administer letter with the Commission early next calendar year, and really build out a much more robust energy efficiency program here at EBCE with dollars that are already being collected from our customers. Next slide. So reach codes, this is one of our older programs. I'll be brief on this. We've talked about it a lot. Just wanted to note that we have been making some good progress. Many of our cities have taken codes or planning to take codes to reach codes to their boards for approval. We've got a couple cities now that have passed their reach codes, Berkeley and Hayward. And we're excited to see that this program has borne fruit, and feel like EBCE's participation here in assisting our cities to develop and pass reach codes and work with their communities to get support for these reach codes has really paid off well. And we'll now looking ahead to the next code cycle in 2023, and thinking about how we can advocate with the California Energy Commission for some statewide electrification codes, which will really go much further towards helping our state meet the carbon neutrality goals that have been set. Next slide, please. We have completed our contract with Stop Waste for our first heat pump hot water heater incentive program. So we are now providing and have in market $1,000 incentive for heat pump hot water heaters. There's also a Bayren Home Plus program, which has an additional $1,000 to the homeowner for these systems. They're still quite new in the US and California, and so are much more expensive, unfortunately, than traditional gas water heaters. So the incentives are pretty large. We're really at the beginning stage of this market transformation. But certainly the reach codes will help, as new construction will all have to, in many of our cities, will be required to be all electric. And we're seeing other counties and CCAs put money towards this program. So there'll be a more regional approach. We were one of the first CCAs to put this money in play, and are expecting others to follow. And this is something that expecting success. We have put some more money into for next year, but need to see how this first program unfolds. And we're just now starting to develop email outreach campaigns to customers who we know are all electric, have all electric homes, and might be the most benefited by transitioning their existing electric hot water heaters to heat pumps. There would be considerable savings there. And ultimately also we want to be transitioning natural gas water heaters, which is the vast majority of water heaters in California, over to these much more efficient electric hot water heaters. So excited to get that going and thinking about how we can roll this into a demand response program later on in the year. Next slide, please. So our induction cooking work is just starting to get going now. We are on the final stages of developing a commissary kitchen electrification grant program. So there's considerable resistance to induction cooking from commercial chefs. The city of Berkeley's natural gas ban has been challenged in the courts by the California Restaurant Association. So we need to be getting the benefits of induction cooking out into the commercial environment and get chefs experience cooking on induction. So commissary kitchens are basically the training grounds for many chefs, as well as food truck chefs, where they pre-prepare their food before going out into in their trucks to serve. And is also a place where residents take cooking classes, which, of course, are not happening right now. But when we get back to somewhat of a semblance of normal life, those types of things will happen again. And so we are planning to basically develop a commissary kitchen electrification grant program. And we've started talking to some of the commissary kitchens across our territory and have good geographic diversity of commissary kitchens, which are interested in taking us up on some dollars to help them electrify one or two of their stations, so that they can have more electric commercial cooking gear and provide that as a testing ground for commercial chefs, as well as an opportunity for regular people, residents of the county, to go to cooking classes and test out this equipment as we shift to more electric living. Next slide, please. So our technical assistance program is continuing. This is for multifamily developments. And we are not only providing technical assistance to some of the multifamily developments that are underway, but also have built out a presentation format, a virtual presentation format for some of the MEPs, mechanical and electrical engineering consulting firms who provide assistance to developers, so that we can train them up on all electric appliances and building design strategies. So, lots of the development in the county is multifamily, and so targeting that sector is quite important as we look at this all electric transition. Next slide, please. I will skip this slide. This is our resilience program. We are launching this with Sunrun for our residential program next week, but we've talked quite a lot about that. So in the interest of time, I'll skip over it. I've skipped over this too. If folks want to, I will skip over this. If folks want to ask questions on these, please feel free at the end, but we've talked about them a lot. Our medical baseline program. So this program was approved by the board, or $500,000 was approved by the board for FY20. We were planning to install solar and storage on homes with electricity dependent children. this summer, but that got put on hold because of COVID-19 and the fact that the medical institutions at the county and hospitals were just not able to take it on in light of COVID-19. So we put that element on hold, but in the interim, we are contracted with ARIP, who we are also working with on our critical facilities work, to build out to start building out the comprehensive plan, which includes reviewing the resources to understand kind of what are the electricity demands of the most common durable medical devices. So feeding tubes, oxygen purifiers, different types of pumps. These are things that people need no matter what, and especially when the power is out. And so we're reviewing those types of medical devices, what their electricity loads might be, and then basically building kind of a matrix of how we could provide battery backup solutions for those different devices for the families that we have in Alameda County. And so as we do that, we will then be able to develop a budget for a larger scalable program for our medically dependent customers next year. So we're doing as much as we can in light of COVID-19 so that when hospital and medical staff and our stakeholders in that environment have a little bit of breathing room, we'll be able to get this going and not have to start from scratch. Next slide, please. EVIP, I will skip that. We talked a lot about that last presentation as well. Let's see, we'll skip over this one too, Adrian, trying to move forward so I don't take up too much time. So getting on to some of the areas that we haven't talked so much about. So medium and heavy duty is obviously a very important focus for us in Alameda County. We've been working with CalSTART and their Drive to Zero initiative to help identify which medium and heavy duty vehicles we can focus on in the interim. There's obviously a lot more development in the light duty classes, but there's more and more medium and heavy duty vehicles which have electric alternatives. And so we are working to be on the forefront of that and working with different 3PLs. Jane has been quite helpful in introducing us to some of the 3PL folks that NUMMI uses in identifying potential partners who we can partner with to develop out medium and heavy duty fleet and EV charging infrastructure. And the dollars from Cal EVIP can be used to charge these medium and heavy duty vehicles. And so as we develop the pipeline for that charging infrastructure, we want to be thinking about the medium and heavy duty opportunities that we have, because certainly diesel emissions and particular emissions in our DACs and our impacted communities are disproportionately impacted by diesel vehicles. Let's see, next slide, please. So one other area that we have been focusing on is owning and operating assets, and specifically solar and storage assets, and also electric vehicle charging assets. They increase load to EVCE, and can deliver other revenues to the organization in the form of low carbon fuel standards credits, LCFS credits. So we are currently working on a pro forma, basically the economic business model of how owning and operating these assets can drive revenue and long-term revenues to the organization. And we see it as one of the potential uses for our reserve fund, our local development reserve. As we, that fund is available for projects, but needs to be repaid over time. And so if we've got a long-term sustainable business model for operating these assets, it's one way that we can leverage our reserve fund. And we also are working on some municipal fleet electrification assistance programs. Berkeley and Alameda and Hayward are being added. We are also working with the city of Albany. Fremont's doing their own program. So lots of work to electrify our municipal fleets. And we are evaluating how we can deploy charging infrastructure to enable that. And then we also have a pilot in Piedmont that we're looking at for some level 2 and DC fast charge street charging based at street lights. So using the existing electrical infrastructure that is already at street lights for deploying charging at the street level. So pretty exciting portfolio of activities on EBCE, developing our own EV charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the last slide here is just an overview of the regulatory engagement that we are constantly working with Melissa and her team on. There's a variety of activities on the transportation electrification side, as well as working with CARB on their low carbon fuel standards. We're constantly working on how to integrate the new DERs into the landscape with microgrids and vehicle grid integration, as well as discussed before, our plan to submit an energy efficiency elect to administer and petition to modify the existing calculation in that approach so that we can increase the amount of energy efficiency dollars that we have access to through that approach. So working collaboratively with the team on making sure that CCAs and EBCE has its fair share and access to programs and incentives across the state. So I think that's the last slide, and be happy to take questions.
Thank you, JP, especially for reducing it down. What I want to do is take public comment first, and then we'll get to any of our panelists that may have questions. Do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, we do. We have 4 speakers: Van Rainey, Alita Dupree, Jessica Tovar, and Blair Beekman. I am going to share the screen and go ahead and unmute the speakers.
Great, thank you. So first person, Van, and then Alita, and then Jessica. Van muted?
No, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak. Basically, I want to start out by thanking JP and his team for all of the efforts they've done to help decarbonize the EBCE community, and definitely appreciate his efforts in reaching out to leverage external sources. It's just that when I look at the overall budget, that one slide that showed how many dollars were being spent, I was just a little bit taken aback by the things like EV storage or EV infrastructure, water heating, and convection or induction cooktops. And I was thinking that seems to be a series of incentives that benefit higher socioeconomic stratas, and I'm just concerned that in this day and in this political environment that we're doing enough to really serve the most disadvantaged or those people in the community that could use the assistance when higher socioeconomic groups may not. I don't know exactly what I would suggest in changing that, but I would just like to see some metric or some kind of effort to express beyond what you've already told us. And I do appreciate the many programs that you've got in place that help that process. And it seems like you've got a lot of balls in the air. So just, broad stroke kind of wish. And then the other thing I'm concerned about is out here in Livermore, we're on your list of people that are considering reach code changes, but I'd like to find out if I can get in touch with somebody at EBCE that could help guide me in those arguments to take before my city council and the Climate Action Plan Committee. I'm done.
Thanks, Van. So I think JP, could you get in touch with Van or afterwards to help him understand who he can talk to, or just say who he should call to talk about this around the reach codes, getting information on reach codes?
Yeah, sure. Our website's up to date. All of our contact information for the different program leads is on the website. And we definitely reached out to the city of Livermore to encourage them to take us up on reach codes. And at the time, and since then, the city has not expressed an interest in doing that. So yeah, happy to talk with you about who you can reach out to at the city to try to encourage them to participate in the next round. Though there's always another opportunity. The code cycle is every 3 years.
Great, thank you. Who did I say was next?
Alita Dupree.
Alita, and then Jessica.
And then Blair.
Okay, Alita.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. This is very, very important. Lots of good work. I see a lot of equity here. I think certainly electrifying hot water heaters is essential. I have an electric hot water heater myself. It works very well. Saves me plenty of money. Induction is valuable. And, I've been using induction for 11 years. When I started using induction, I got hooked. So I don't really see why people would be resistant to it. It's kind of like being in a Tesla for the first time. Electrifying kitchens can help with the health issues because when you burn natural gas in large kitchens or small kitchens, it's emissions. And so we want to keep the air cleaner for our hardworking folks in kitchens. So I definitely support that. And there are a lot of small businesses in food service that could certainly benefit this. So there is equity in this. Care program, very important. We got to get the awareness out. I am a disabled person and I have a reduced fare Clipper card. Gets me half fare off on the buses and the trains. I know many people that I've run into and they had no idea that they could get a reduced fare Clipper card even though they're over 65 or they're disabled. So we want to get people involved on the care program so that way they can have more confidence about keeping up with their electric bills. So there's equity in that awareness. Generally, I've been cooking with electricity and I have the zero emission kitchen. I'm running off wind power right now. The legendary Windows on the World restaurant at the top of Tower 2 of the World Trade Center had an all electric kitchen, 1,300 feet above the street. It was declared that the building had to be all electric above the ground. So great cooking, whether it is in a legendary restaurant like Windows on the World or in a small favorite, quote, hole in the wall, can be done with electricity because I do it myself at home. This local development is not just local. I mean, it is true that with local renewables, we're not shipping our money out of the EBCE service area. But there is also a regional significance to this as well with the decarbonization. As I leave you, the New York City subway, as legendary and historic, is not just about the city of New York, but it is a system that indeed has international significance and ramifications. So let's get to work on this development and build ourselves a cleaner and greener EBCE territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Jessica?
Hello, Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And yeah, we're excited about this local development business plan in general, because it's something that we advocated for to have community benefits in Alameda County and now also Tracy. We do want to emphasize again the need to focus benefits on disadvantaged communities. In the form of clean energy jobs, for example, and giving these opportunities like the energy efficiency jobs to small, local, and emerging businesses in the East Bay. And really focus on making these programs drivers for social, racial, and environmental justice. As opposed to making them investments that only benefit the elite or become drivers for gentrification in our communities. So that's something we really want to emphasize. And you know, I've said this before. You know, vulnerable communities, the disabled, folks of color, poor communities, heavy emphasis on elders, youth. You know, and just really looking not at personal ownership, but community ownership and value in improving our local, our air, as well as the impact on global climate change. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Blair? Still on mute. Oh, went off, went back on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Blair Beekman here. It was a very nice review for myself, and why I really like coming to these meetings, or I guess listening to these meetings. At this point, I don't quite know how to say it, but yeah, I learned a lot, and it's nice, and I thank you for that. And he described carbon neutral ideas of 2023 that you'll be able to expand your lives upon, and what the work you'll be doing at that time. I don't know if 2023 carbon neutral goals will be met, or that's the time you'll just be really taking off, starting those ideas. But it's, you know, I've watched San Jose Community Energy for a little while. I've gone to some of their meetings, and it was my hope that by 2023, we can really have a solar power plan together. And, you know, it's not set in stone, but if it's people like myself and others who make a continual effort for that, you know, there can be some real strides to bring in solar power at that time. And I sound really silly, I'm sure, saying this, but it's important to myself, and I think it's an important concept, and I hope that, you know, we can work on it, and it can be acceptable, and yeah, just the good stuff to be working towards. And carbon neutral has that air that is just working with nuclear power, and that's no picnic, that's no, you know, prize, really. And it's really how to address solar power. And I think, you know, he mentioned, you know, the solar power in the battery saving packs, battery packs. And that was an important concept explained last month that was really nice of you guys, and hopeful. Thank you for that. And to mention, how much time? I got a minute left here. The street light poles to be used as chargers for cars. That's incredible ideas of what can happen, what can be of help for low-income neighborhoods, because that's a serious issue in low-income neighborhoods, how battery chargers can be a part of a low-income future. And to be available in streetlights in all local neighborhoods is a good goal, and I thank you for that. And yeah, solar power is just the key to things. And you know, nuclear power is just a part of this whole COVID system that we really need to address. We have to work towards positive sustainability in the future. That has to be an important lesson we learn from this COVID, no matter how we go forward. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Blair. I'm going to open it up now to our folks. If anybody on the committee has any comments or questions, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I have two quick questions for JP, and then we'll move on. One, I'm not sure this would work, but had you thought about prepaid or pay-as-you-go electricity for any of the care programs, and or for those in arrears, not necessarily care, but for those in arrears? And the second being, when you're putting together the pro forma for the EV charging, do you have the ability to include non-energy benefits when considering kind of the overall value to the community?
Yeah, hey Mary. So on the first, we do have, or when COVID hit, we put in play the ability to do budget billing, which is a flattening of the payment plan.
That's not what I mean though. That's not pay as you go. It's like a credit card. You use it until you don't have it anymore, and then you put more money on it.
Got it. Right. Yeah. So we have, to my knowledge, we have not looked at that. That'd be something we could chat with.
Mary.
You move out there.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, that's a product that we're not able to provide because we don't have the ability to disconnect customers.
Well, I was wondering about that because of just the fact that we do generation. That's why I wasn't positive it worked.
You can't effectively do pay as you go if when people stop paying, your only option is to send them back to PG&E.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then on the pro forma, you know, we're certainly evaluating what are the other benefits. There's a considerable number of energy benefits, quantitative benefits, obviously the revenue side, potential LCFS credits, the potential to have pricing signals to drive charging behavior during high sun and wind hours when the marginal cost of generation is low. So those are some of the financial values, you know, and then, yeah, we're looking at the avoided GHG emissions. We're also thinking about, you know, basically carbon offsets and what's the value of avoided carbon in transitioning gasoline vehicles to electric. So, you know, right now the pro forma is largely financial with, you know, other ways to look at, you know, things like emissions to, you know, to build that value proposition.
Okay, thanks. We have other hands up. So Anna Olivia, Ernie, and then Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for that fantastic presentation. I'm really excited about several of the things I was hearing in there. The Connected Communities program is fantastic and inspiring. I had a couple specific questions, but I'm just going to give an example and then kind of give an overarching question. So like, addressing Jessica Tovar's question, statement around support for clubs, I'm wondering if you have developed outreach for like monolingual, non-English restaurants along with subsidies to help those businesses that don't have the economic resources to transition, but are likely to have folks who are really heavily impacted working in those kitchens, and or you know what those look like for small local and emerging businesses. But the overarching sort of part of that to address some of the other concerns is, oh, my camera's off, sorry. It's in flight. Is to really look at how this whole portfolio plays out with the equity metrics that we spend all that time developing. And I'm on the Equity and Access Committee now with the Transportation Commission, working between 9 counties. Again, super happy to provide support, because while one particular program may benefit one group more, our goal was to, as a portfolio, have those benefits be balanced. And so I'm wondering how this portfolio plays out, both in distribution of programs, but also in distribution of economic resources, say over a 3-year period, because we're going to be limited in what we can invest in each year. And you have done a fantastic job bringing forth some super creative, really amazing ways to benefit our community and absolutely leverage outside dollars in a way that is extremely impressive. I'm just wondering what that looks like spread out over the equity metrics, if you can share those things with us. And that really kind of gets to the heart of it, I think.
Sure. So, for all of the programs, we are certainly looking at how we can target either development and into our disadvantaged communities and to care and medical baseline and elder customers. We are also really focused on multi-language. So, all of our outreach materials are being translated into at least Spanish, Chinese, potentially Vietnamese also. So we're looking at multilingual approaches as well for our programs. I think from a small emerging business perspective, there are some programs that are going to be, as you say, more targeted to those businesses, and we have to think about which of the programs are actually going to work for those businesses. And I will admit that the small business category is a tough one. And so as we think about building out our programs around, say, heat pump hot water heaters, which are eligible for small businesses, as well as the next version of our induction cooking program, which will be a grant program for residents. The small local restaurants would be a category that we would focus on. We ended up having to pull back on that program because of COVID-19 and the fact that most restaurants are closed down. So I think that's a target category that we are also looking at for our energy efficiency pay for performance commercial program. So I think, to the extent that we can, identify some of these programs that are eligible and able to be targeted at small and emerging businesses, there will definitely be a focus there. For equity metrics, yes, thank you for bringing that up. We've definitely talked about it, and I think, it's an ongoing piece of work to develop those metrics. We talked in detail about kind of the economic and social metrics associated with the deployment of these programs, and reporting back on that as we get these programs out, and having the equity metrics associated with each of those categories, economic and workforce and environmental, is something that we will bring back to the committee and the board to be reporting on the uptake of these programs. To be honest, so far, we're just getting these programs out there. And so the level of participation so far that we can report back on is reach codes. And the impacts of that is actually quite hard to measure. As we get our resilience program up and running, our EV charger programs up and running, our heat pump hot water heater programs up and running, and actually start to deliver these services to end customers, that will then be able to start reporting that back on who's participating. And so I think that's what I would want to take as a next step is, further refining those metrics, and then, what's the cadence that we can report back to the CAC and the board on about those participation rates, and also measuring the economic benefits and impacts to the community, which is another major element, of the metrics that we want to measure and report back on.
Thank you for that. I will volunteer to help if staff is interested or finds it helpful. If they do not, I do trust your leadership. We do find it to be a lot easier to achieve our metrics if we know what it is we are measuring. So having clearly defined equity measures, not just who participates, because that's a success of our outreach and marketing, but what it is that we're actually defining as equity is really helpful as we are developing a new transportation system and a fare integration system. It is really hard to just try and create those things without knowing what equity goals we're specifically striving for. So I encourage those also to, I would encourage staff to examine things like, I love the whole streetlights as a charging station thing. That is brilliant. Whoever came up with that is just, that's great. And to couple that with a program that addresses electrification as a vehicle for gentrification. And so not just subsidies for used electric vehicles, which are awesome and really good, but maybe looking at providing free like scooter shares or things like that, because again, the focus on individual ownership really cuts out a lot of folks in the disabled community who are elderly, who have a variety of other barriers to access going on to private vehicle ownership, especially when it is such a significant portion of our budget. But there are ways to address that and achieve higher penetration into our communities of concern. So again, thank you so much for the report, and I hope you take me up on the offer for assistance if it is helpful, and I look forward to seeing what equity metrics you have developed. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna Olivia.
Thank you, Anna Olivia. Ernie, and then Cynthia.
Hey, JP. First of all, thank you for the amazing job you're doing playing in the LDBP toy chest we created. This is always amazing. I still hold my feelings that such a large percentage of our LDBP budget going towards vehicle electrification is not a priority that we should be looking at, but nonetheless, you're doing a great job on it. I'm curious, you were talking about that our $20 million investment in the 4 programs that you're working on right now are producing will produce $160 million in work. It may be too early in all of the programs, but I'm wondering whether or not you may know this off the top of your head, first of all, how that breaks down in the additional money coming back from the $20 million investment per program, but also on job creation. I know we were talking about a year ago, the difficulties in assigning whether or not a job is being created, like through the heat pump program, work would have already been done on a traditional heat pump and whatnot. But I'm wondering whether or not you've come up with any predicted job creation numbers for these individual programs, more so than you had a year ago.
Hey, Ernie, thanks for the question. So I think there's kind of estimated ways that we can think about job years, and then there's empiricals. And I think the way that we will be working through this is to be using the estimated version, right? Like, it's not that every contractor is going to hire a new person for this work. That's unreasonable. So what we will do is be looking at the number of hours that it takes for a person to, or a team of people to install a solar and battery or install a heat pump hot water heater, and be able to back that out into essentially hours and then job years. We certainly, in our larger programs, have some more influence, like we do with Sunrun, for example, in our resilience program, where we're working with them on workforce development and hiring practices, because it's a much larger program over multiple years. So we have some more influence with them. But for something like the heat pump hot water heater program, where that incentive is available to any one of a number of contractors who are doing heat pumps in Alameda County. So that's a small number now. Hopefully will become a bigger number over time. They're doing onesie, twosie kind of things. So that's going to be, an hour estimate of the number of, job hours created, where we can point to, the additionality that our dollars are putting into play in the form of jobs in the county.
And just, I'm sorry, just one quick there. So until these programs develop more, it sounds like we don't have any more particular idea of the job hours that will be created in each program until they develop more so than last year.
Yeah, I think we can develop estimates today based on, say, so for the solar program, there is an average number of hours of labor for installing a rooftop PV system of a specific size. And that will vary based on the size. The bigger system you get, the less hours per installed kilowatt. So those are things that we can work with our partners to develop and then back that out in the capacity of the program. But then, reporting out on that is really going to be reporting out once those jobs have been installed, once we've signed up those customers, once we've gotten those people out on roofs, and once we are then able to, to report back on the number of hours that have been created. So I think it's certainly an exercise to think about what is the money that we're deploying, and over the span, what will the jobs be created. I'm much more interested in talking about the actual hours that have been deployed as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Cynthia?
Yes, thank you, JP. This is certainly a very comprehensive presentation tonight, and I like the fact that you are, or your team is leveraging dollars to the extent possible. I think that's great. And I also think that the connected communities, underconnected communities, the ability to for low-income folks, or a sector of low-income folks, to get an additional rebate, as I understand that is great. Also, the heat pump water heater rebates, that's good. I know it's going to start out small. There are things here for the low-income community, but nevertheless, I would like to see more expansion into those, more assistance for those communities. And I would like to ask you, under the building electrification, does that include older buildings, or is the building electrification only for newer buildings, please?
Sure. So building electrification as a category is including new and existing buildings. So REACH codes are by and large going to be impacting new buildings as they go up. One of our cities, Piedmont, has put a REACH code in place for existing buildings, but that's not really hitting the concern that you're raising. Our multifamily technical assistance program is for new and existing buildings. So there are new buildings that are going in place under development, and there's actually quite a lot of retrofitting of existing older buildings that technical assistance can also be available for. And we also have other work underway. One of our community innovation grants is for evaluating level 1 electric vehicle charging in existing multifamily dwellings. About, about 80% of our buildings are at least 20 years old, and something like 70 or 60% are like 50 years old. These are multifamily dwellings. So looking at those existing buildings and those older multifamily dwellings is definitely something that we are looking at for both transportation and building electrification as a category. Our built environment is quite old, and it's also quite a challenge. So, right now with building electrification being fairly new and fairly expensive, the most kind of cost-effective route to electrifying buildings is in new construction. And that's where it actually makes financial sense to not install gas and install all electric. And so at the early stages of a market, you kind of try to go where there's an open door instead of a wall. New buildings and new construction is where that exists in building electrification. I think, over time, as we get more commercialization of these technologies and they become more cost effective, that's where the retrofit market really takes off. We're certainly looking at it, and it needs to be addressed because it's really where our building stock is. It's existing and quite old. But with building electrification being quite new, we're really in the early stages. Frankly, most permitting departments don't know what a heat pump hot water heater is. It's that new. So we're just really trying to get it kind of off the ground, and certainly looking at that existing building stock as a priority. It's a little harder to hit right now.
Okay, well, again, I want to say that your presentation was quite comprehensive, and I understand what you're saying, but sometimes the optics are very important also. So thank you very, very, very much. I'd like to see. I understand I understand what you just said, but I'd like to see some outreach, when feasible, into the existing older stock.
Yeah.
But again, that's your call, but thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, all. So it is 9:18. I want to do a time check for us. We have one more item, and we actually have three more items. We have the data management call center. We still have to do our chair elections, and then we have our CAC member and staff announcements before we adjourn. I will put it to this group that if we want to drop item C8 for today, and that is an action item for the board, it will not come back up. It would just be something that we as a CAC do not discuss. We can do that, and that would get us out of here probably about 15 to 20 minutes earlier, but I'll put it to the group. So who would like to continue on with item C8? And you're gonna have to unmute yourself and say something.
Point of clarification, do we have public comment on C8?
That's a good question. I don't know.
We have one speaker for item C8.
Okay.
I feel like we do at least need to hear that.
Yep, that's possible, but we don't take it up fully. Monica?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about item C7. I never got a chance to raise my hand, but in the essence of time, I won't ask the question. I'll just make a comment to thank staff. And you did a great job. Good job also leveraging all the funds. I look forward to updates in the future. And I also should have thanked staff for the IRP presentation. Didn't do that either, but I feel bad. But now it's on the record, so I don't feel as bad anymore.
There you go. Thanks.
And I'm okay with skipping C8.
And Mary,
okay. Yes?
hi, Mary. I'm sorry, my hand is raised on my screen, but it sounds like it's not raised on yours. So.
No, I see it. Rick? Was that Rick?
No, this is Ernie.
Oh, Ernie, I see it, but you had talked once, so I figured you had you said something.
Oh no,
already.
this is about C8. This is about the question.
Okay. Yes, C8.
So no, I do want to discuss C8.
All right. Then I figured that we might, so we will continue on and try and make C8 go pretty fast. Who do we have on staff to present this? Is this Kelly? Kelly, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Good evening. Hi, this is Kelly Brezovec, Senior Manager, Account Services. Chair Sutter, in the interest of time, I think I'd like to just address what I understand is your question about the call center.
Well,
Is that correct?
And I'll tell the group the thing that I had heard that I assumed our group would be interested in is kind of the push off from having a call center in Alameda County and what the plans were. That was actually prior to me reading this memo, though. Kelly, because you guys did
okay. Yeah, because it is the plan is outlined in there. So, I mean, I can be present for other questions that come about. But again, I know you were just trying to move the meeting forward, so I don't need to take up more time by presenting what, you know, it's a very brief memo.
Right. I think that this is my understanding, and then Kelly, you can add to it. Staff is looking for the board to approve updating the renewal of the contract for this data management center services with SMUD for 2 years. There is also a plan to move over to an Alameda County specific call center within 2 years. That is laid out. Essentially, that's what I see happening here is.
Yes, the contract with SMUD was set to end at the end of this year. We owe SMUD a 90-day notice that we will continue or not continue their services. And so this is just a continuation of services. We have quite a few upcoming items that will really affect the data services and call center parts of our operations, including the addition of our new communities next year, the transitions of residential customers from a tiered rate structure to a time of use based rate structure, and some other rate changes that will be coming about. Commercial time of use will be defaulting to a new time periods as well next spring. So this adds business continuity in addition to allowing us to maintain the services that we've been using.
So let's hear public comment, and then we'll go with, I know Ernie has his hand up, and as does Anna Olivia, and I think Cynthia, I saw yours as well.
Great.
So public first, who did we have?
We have Blair Beekman, and
Blair.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just get my online timer ready. And I'm unmuting him now. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, Blair.
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thanks.
Thank you. For this issue, I'm not entirely sure what you'll be talking about. I hope you can talk a bit more about how it would just be interesting to learn how you exactly work with SMUD, I guess you call it. And yeah, it just would be a nice subject just to learn about. And I had a bit more to say. I cannot think of what I wanted to say, but yeah, I guess I'll just wait, and thank you for this item. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Blair. Ernie?
Sure, hold on a second. Let me get back onto that screen. So I guess I have a question and possibly a suggestion, but I would like to do 30 seconds of framing on this for those who weren't around back in 2017. Back in 2017, we did an extended series of RFPs and interviews repeatedly for the data management and call center needs. At the end of a long, convoluted process, we actually came up with someone that was approved by staff and the committee that looked at the respondents, which was GridX. GridX was a company that had agreed to agree in writing to move their headquarters to Alameda County, bring 100 employees, and do our data management and call center. And my particular union, just to put everything out in the open, had actually negotiated with them for a neutrality agreement. So this was in effect going to be a union company and 100 jobs brought into Alameda County. Not that all those jobs would have been for EBCE. There were some, we'll just call them political developments. And what ended up happening was GridX ended up not being approved by the board, and SMUD was brought in. At that time, there was assurances that all the jobs that had been outsourced to Sacramento would be brought back to Alameda County once we were up and running. We are now up and running. So looking at this resolution, what I'm not seeing is any kind of assurance that we are going to get these jobs back in Alameda County. There's future consideration, but there's nothing in this resolution that I see that in any way secures or makes more certain that these jobs will not continue to be outsourced to Sacramento should in 2 years' time conditions be considered by staff or the board to keep them outsourced to Sacramento. So that's a little bit of the framing. And I guess what I'm asking is, can this resolution, and that's probably no, can this resolution of the board be amended to include some kind of commitment in the whereas, in the therefores, not in the whereases, that these jobs will come back after the end of this 2-year extension? It would be my question to staff.
So Ernie, we can't make any of those changes, but I think that we can advise the board that, you know, that we feel strongly that perhaps something should be added to it. And Nick unmuted, so he probably has something to say about that.
So, you know, I think what we have laid out here is a commitment to bringing in a in-source or outsource. I think we don't yet know. That's one of our challenges. But customer service capabilities in Alameda County as we implement through our roadmap. The challenge I think we have from a timing perspective is there are many uncertainties around the implementation of the various technology solutions that are prerequisites to make a switch to a call center. So to have a call center in place, we need to have a fully functional customer relationship management system. It has to then be integrated into the data management system that SMUD has, and then eventually into potentially a future vendor. So it operates as the system of record for all of our data management and information transactions. Only once you have that infrastructure in place can you actually take the step to in-source your call center. So we could continue to work with an outsourced call center. The question becomes, what are the outsourced call centers that are located in Alameda County that would be willing to consider a short-term contract? If we want a long-term contract, then we're sort of fixing ourselves to the idea that we're going to be with an outsourced call center for a long time. So I think when we think about the future considerations, the reason why we're not setting ourselves to it must happen within 12, 18, 24 months is that we're talking about a very complex IT integration project that we have to pursue to position ourselves to be able to bring on the customer service capabilities in-house. And then once you've done that, then there's a question about, like, what kind of a call center do we operate in-house versus what kind of call center capabilities do we contract externally? One of the things that we found, and we have a very seasonal call center volumes, right? So 9 to 10, 11 months out of the year, we have very steady, fairly low volumes. I'm gonna throw a number out here. This is not really the accurate number, but let's just say our average volumes would, require a staffing level in the 3 to 5 customer relationship specialists. but you might find yourself 2 weeks, twice a year, requiring 3, 4, 5x staff volume because you have the joint rate mailer that goes out. And so you have a real spike over the 2 weeks when the joint rate mailer goes out and customers calling in. Or you might have one event a year, like a time of use transition that's going to be occurring next spring where you see a big spike. And so that raises questions from a staffing perspective to say, do we staff for 2 to 4 weeks a year? Or do we have a partner who we work with to manage the overflow calls during those spike periods? That then leads us back to sort of the technology solution that we're going to implement. And are we going to have a technology solution that allows for integration with a third-party call center that integrates into our call center? Or are we going to integrate into their call center? So these conditionalities, I think, are what makes it very challenging to sort of tie ourselves to a firm requirement within the resolution that within 2 years we shall do this.
Well, Nick, thank you. I appreciate you expounding on some of the complexities. I'm sure we've discovered some new complexities since we sent out the original RFP back in 2017 to get up and running. But whether or not, while ideally it would be all EBCE staff eventually that are handling all this, whether or not it's in-house or out-house, they should need to be local. And if we are not getting the board to commit to making these jobs local, I can see 8 years from now, SMUD still handling a lot of our business when it should be Alameda Jobs. That was the original vision, and it was one that was pushed aside due to political, considerations at the time. So the complexities, I won't even pretend to understand all of them, but there's complexities. But if we don't commit politically to bringing all these jobs to Alameda County, it's not going to happen. So what I'm asking for is not, an assurance what's going to be in-house, out-house, what that's going to look like, but that these jobs are local at the end of this two-year extension.
I hear you, Ernie.
Thanks, Ernie. Ann Olivia. Well, actually, Ernie, do you have anything more before we move on?
No, not at this time.
Okay, Ann Olivia, and then Monica, and then Cynthia.
What was just said, and I would like to back Mr. Pacheco up in what he just said. In 2017, this was a massive and expensive fight. It took months, and it was, there was a lot of animosity that happened in contention over this. GridX had a technology solution that would have brought the jobs into our county, and the only reason that several of our board members, and we can repost this series of meetings if anyone is interested in watching them, that several board members agreed to go with SMUD was the guarantee that at the end of 1 year, high-level staff would be onboarding, like the complicated in-house things would be being brought in-house, and then at the end of 2 years, we would have our call center staff inside. We had a plan that was at least presented to us. Staff had a plan for bringing those seasonal fluctuation jobs. So when notices go out, when new cities are brought in, all those kinds of stuff, like when those fluctuations happen, staff had a plan for addressing that fluctuation in staffing issues. And there was a lengthy and many meeting negotiation that happened with the Alameda Labor Council to get their sign off. So I would also like to state that these are the same issues. Granted, there are probably more of them that have been identified, but these are the same issues that were brought up 2 years ago, and we had an assurance that those would be in-house jobs. Well, not all of them under our agency, the high-level positions under our agency, with local cooperation for addressing the fluctuating need. So I strongly believe that this body needs to advise the board that unless real language is included, that these will continue to be Sacramento jobs, and we will have, I mean, I believe we even went into litigation over this. So I would encourage this body to advise the board to include stronger language about requiring in Alameda County job development of this.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because we now are starting in 2021, we will be serving San Joaquin County. What is the view about sort of the inclusion of multiple counties, given that we have multiple counties in our service territory?
That would be a question I would direct towards the board and ask for their clarification. In our service territory was an assurance that was made to bring peace at the end of multiple months of negotiation. And so how the board wants to address that when it comes to an expanding service territory would decidedly be up to them. As a advisory body, I would say that we just need to bring it local, and the board should be authorized to decide what local means.
Thank you, Olivia. Anything else? No. Monica, and then Cynthia.
So I too was here in 2017 and was actually part of the selection process, and vaguely remember a lot of the stuff that has been raised by Ernie and Olivia. I don't remember the litigation or any of that part. Maybe I wasn't privy to that, but certainly remember going through this process. Having said that, though, I also understand, because I work for CCA, some of the complexities around providing this service and the technical requirements and the ever-changing requirements to provide this service. So I think that if we were to, excuse me, take action on this, I wouldn't necessarily be supportive of a mandate to, excuse me, to force staff to do this. That is, to bring all these jobs to Alameda County, but rather, excuse me, but rather to direct staff to evaluate it. I think much of what, excuse me, much of how they laid it out in the staff recommendation or the staff report, because I would hope that at the end of the day, the decision is made based on one that's feasible and makes business sense. And I'll leave it at that because I'm having a cough attack. So.
Thanks, Monica. Cynthia? Cynthia, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ernie, and Olivia, and Monica. I do recall a discussion from 2017 when I was on the steering committee to bring the call center back into Alameda County. And in fact, I actually have inquired about it during the last year to see where we are in terms of bringing it in-house. I do understand somewhat the complexities that Nick is talking about in terms of data management and integrating the new communities into the program. However, I do think we need to make a commitment. Now, when I look at this report, which I did read thoroughly, EBCE staff began negotiating a contract extension with SMUD in January of this year. Not to criticize, but I wish that there would have been a report back to the Community Advisory Committee prior to tonight, because this is an action item in which, you know, the arguments could have been laid out earlier. You know, needing to continue with SMUD. Also, in the most recent budget that you passed last month, the budget did not, the 2021 budget does not include staffing or other costs for an EBCE call center. Additionally, as I read down this paragraph, but we will have the option to bring one or more EBCE staff on board, has call center representatives, I guess during this next 2-year period. I want us to exercise that option to start the reintegration of staff during this 2-year period, so that we don't wind up 2 years later with the same motion in front of us. Additionally, when I look at the January 2022 issue RFP for call center service support, what I would add, and I know there's a suggestion, I would add issue RFP for an in-house call center services support center. And then lastly, I see on the last page here, there is some option to reduce the call center support hours to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Weekdays. I don't know how that impacts, our clients. And I don't know, I don't know enough about your peak hours and all that. But I would like to respectfully request that there is a commitment or some language to bring the call center, back into Alameda County, or some discussion in the next. I'd like to see it brought back in within the next 2 years, understanding that currently we are not in the position, because of the data management, to bring it in currently. But we need to take proactive steps to bring it in. So that's my comment. I don't mean to be critical, but thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So this is an action item for us because it's an action item for the board. And so what I heard from Ernie and Olivia and Cynthia was that there's a strong belief that this resolution needs to make a commitment to bringing local jobs back into EBC service territory. And I heard from Monica that that decision needs to also make business sense. We can try and craft a specific motion for that, but that's essentially what I heard. And so it seems to me that that is the type of information that I would bring back, and the advice I would take to the board in 2 days. Anybody disagree with that?
No, I think you captured it, Mary.
Okay, then what I would like to have is a call, a vote on us making that advice. Verbal vote. Adrian?
Do we have a person
Specific.
brought the motion second?
That's a good point. No.
So I move that Mary deliver that summary to the board.
Seconded.
Yeah, I'm not interested in a summary, because a summary does not, it's not a commitment. So,
Yeah, no, that was a solid, thank you, Cynthia. I will clarify. I move that Mary inform the board that the Community Advisory Committee would like to see a commitment to local job development that also makes financial sense. But the word she actually used.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a first by Anna Olivia, second by, I think it was Monica.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh no, Ernie. Ernie seconded it.
Ernie seconded. I'm
So-
proceeding with the roll call vote.
Yep.
Member Eldridge?
Wait a minute,
What are we voting on? What exactly? Like, that's not a real motion. Like, we're motion.
That isn't a motion. That's exactly right. That's not
I'm
a
sorry,
motion.
Mary, can you restate what you said so we can make that a clear motion?
Sure. The CAC supports a firm commitment to local jobs that make financial sense.
And we're not, so there's no call center anywhere in that statement. That's just.
I'm sorry, make a firm commitment to local jobs within a call center that makes financial sense.
So
Wait,
Mary, may I add that we specify within this resolution
Yes.
that it be, okay, thank you.
So then are we supporting the resolution? Is there a motion to
We're
support
not
the resolution with that amendment?
I believe, you were right. This is very good to clarify this quite specifically. I would move that we support staff's resolution with the amendment that language get more specific around call center jobs inside of our service territory. And an analysis of economic feasibility of that plan to be brought back to the board.
And this is Ernie, actually this is both for data management and call center, so I think all should be included, please.
I'm going to say something. This is Cynthia. What I would like to see is the data the data center, data management and call services contract renewal with Sacramento Municipal Utilities District (SMUD) that we have language there to start the integration of the call center and the data management into Alameda County within the next 2 years.
So this is Ernie, and we're making sausage here, obviously, and it's messy. But so,
well,
but
can I? Yeah, but let me say what I mean by that.
Sure.
Because I think if we have, I think if we say we would like to have it come in-house within the next 2 years, that allows staff to give their financial analysis and state, why it's not possible, or, why it's not feasible, or how much it's going to cost. So that is part of the analysis that staff do when they can consider an item. So, cost is always a factor, especially now. But as you said, and as Anna Olivia said, and I was there too, that we wanted those jobs to come in-house to Alameda County within the next 2 years, and that was, I guess over a little bit more than 2 years ago. So there might be costs again. So that would be another reason not to bring the jobs in-house. So when staff does their analysis, they will say, why they can't do it, or, what the impediments are. It would have been great if they, they have been negotiating with SMUD since January of this year, that they would have brought us an interim report so that we could have done the analysis, before 9:50 tonight. So, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that, but I need to see a commitment during the next 2 years, or the attempt of a commitment. Otherwise, I'm going to have to vote no.
So here's the resolution that I have at this point that we can vote on. We move that there's a movement that we support staff's data management call center resolution with more language in the resolution that makes a firm commitment to local jobs within a business plan that makes financial sense. The CAC advises that this commitment ensures that local jobs occur after the SMUD contract, e.g. after 2 years.
What's the last sentence? What's the last sentence, please?
The CAC advises that this commitment ensures that local jobs occur after the SMUD contract is completed, i.e. after 2 years.
But if we're making it contingent on staff doing an economic or business assessment on the liability, huh?
The movement, what I have here isn't contingent on that. We're advising that this commitment ensures that they occur after 2 years, whatever happens to make that happen.
Mary, one slight clarification, maybe just explicitly stating that the data management and call center jobs are within EBCE service territory after this extension of contract.
Yeah, local jobs being EBCE service territory.
Right? I believe the clarification there was data management and call center jobs.
That's correct.
Because they're two different contracts that got awarded to the same group because of things.
So Mary, your resolution basically is a mandate that the jobs come to EBC's service territory within 2 years or after the 2 years.
It's advising that, first of all, we're asking for a firm commitment, and then we're advising that that firm commitment happen in 2 years.
Okay, I'm not understanding
which will include an economic analysis of its feasibility.
Okay, with that I can agree to, a commitment to evaluate it. I'm not going to produce a mandate without an evaluation. That doesn't make any sense. For you to say you must do it this way without, I mean, it could cost 20 times what it costs today to do that. And I'm not going to commit to that without actually seeing what it would cost or take to get it to come here. So.
This is Ernie, and I respect that, Monica. I will point out that GridX, the original winner of the contract, well, they didn't win it, the board didn't vote on them. They actually succeeded in fulfilling all the economic and necessary components of the RFP. So
yeah, and hopefully if there's another RFP that goes out to replace SMUD in 2 years, they're still viable and they can still provide that service at an economic basis. Yeah, or someone can, but I'm not willing to presuppose that and say that it will change no matter what.
I don't think that anyone is saying, if this is a really economically stupid decision, we want you to do it anyways out of principle. We're saying making a firm commitment to bringing the jobs into our service territory for both data management and call center, which includes a financial analysis as part of a plan to be brought to the board.
Okay, but that's not what Mary said in her statement. She said it differently. So that I can support, but that's not what Mary had said. So if you want to reread your resolution.
Mary, do you consider that a friendly amendment?
I do. Here's the new one. We support staff's data management and call center resolution with more language in the resolution that makes a firm commitment to jobs for both the data management and call center makes a firm commitment to bring jobs for both these into our service territory. And it includes a financial analysis to be brought to the board about this. And then I think Cynthia feels pretty strongly, we don't have to have it, that this commitment ensure that, you know, they think about this happening like within 2 years, that it's not pushed off another 4 years is kind of the point I think that Cynthia is making, which I think is a good one. Either that or we want to say the financial analysis. I mean, there's an issue. You can have the financial analysis that occurs in 2 years. And then at that point, then you got another 2 years before you decide to bring them in-house. You know, so I think that it's that point of trying to get this happening sooner rather than later that is the point that wants to be, that Cynthia's trying to bring out.
Yes, that is my point, and staff would know, you know, if we're trying to bring this in-house in the next 2 years, that they would be doing a financial analysis along the way, because that's, because that's, what we're advocating for.
So then how about that the motion be, if I can offer it in my language, that we support staff's recommendation to retain SMUD for data management and call center services, and include in the resolution that we would like to direct staff, or have the board direct staff, to evaluate the feasibility, cost effectiveness of bringing a call center to SVCE's service territory by the time this extension expires.
I think that's great.
You are okay with that, Cynthia? Because all that says is the financial analysis will be done. It doesn't say anything about an RFP or anything going out, and to hire somebody like that takes them a while.
Right? Don't they have to do? They have to do an RFP, because they can't just keep extending the SMUD contract. It's just a 2-year extension.
Yes, we're not seeking to. The whole premise of this extension is that we are going to be issuing another RFP in the next 12 to 15 months for the full suite of services that we're seeking to bring on board. I will also just note that the point around call center versus data management jobs, I think, is they are very different. And talking about data management, the reality is there may not be firms with these specific capabilities based in Alameda County, or in the context of GridX, they did offer to move. They did not move, so they are now based in Santa Clara County.
Yeah, they did not move because they didn't get the contract. They had agreed to move if SMUD hadn't got the contract instead of them.
That's fair.
Hayward.
So I just think that make the recommendation that the group feels makes the most sense. But I will say, from a staff perspective, a firm mandate that all of these jobs be located in a specific geographic location creates, I think, the risk of very serious economic impacts. We'll assess them, and there's obviously going to be a preference for trying to do as much locally and as much in-house as we can. But you think about CRM. On this agenda, we have a matter to enter into a contract with Salesforce for a CRM. Those are data management jobs. There are no large CRM software providers based in Alameda County.
Well, Nick, so your point is taken, but it's taken in under the perspective that we had 2 San Diego companies that agreed to move facilities to Alameda County, and we had a Santa Clara company that agreed to move their facilities to Alameda County. We had 3 companies, 2 from San Diego and one from Santa Clara. I believe that we will be in a strong enough position in 2 years.
Ernie, for call center.
Well, data management.
Calpine had never agreed to open up their data managements.
Those San Diego companies had actually agreed with to open up call centers in conjunction with call centers that fell through during the RFP process. We can talk about the details if you want. I remember them clearly. So it was all doable at the time, and it will be 2 years from now, I believe. And if not, the analysis by staff will show that, and we will deal with it. But if we're not striving for it, we will not get it. We're 2 years later, and we're no closer to local jobs than we were.
That's exactly my.
Chair, I'd like to call the question, and
Thank you.
As the person who first who did bring that forward, I would like to stick with the stronger language around directing staff to strive to bring these jobs in county or in our service territory, because we are now no longer just in one county.
Yep. So call the question, folks, means that there's not really any more discussion. We're going to go with this. Let me read to you what I have. We can do an up or down vote at that point. So we support the current data management call center resolution and would like to have and advise inclusion of more language in the resolution that makes a firm commitment to jobs for both data management and call center in our service territory. We also advise the board require staff to perform a financial analysis that is brought to the board prior to the next RFP for call center efforts. I don't have it all fully done. That's kind of what I think I heard.
Minus prior to the RFP part, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do we have a second for?
I'll second it.
Okay.
And can we
up
say
or down
prior?
vote?
Yeah, can we say prior to the next RFP?
I did. Prior
Okay,
to the
thank
next
you.
RFP. I have it. It's
Thank you.
there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Should I proceed with a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Member Eldridge?
Yes.
Member Franch?
Yes.
Member Laundrie?
Yes.
Member O'Connell?
Yes.
Member Pacheco?
Yes.
Member Padilla?
Yes.
Chair Sutter?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Passes unanimously. Great. So now we're going to bring back item C2, which are chair elections. I think that we have, I know Stephanie has talked a little bit with Ernie about this. I'm not quite sure how we put forward a chair and vice chair. I know that myself and Jane are willing to move forward in our respective positions for one more year. I see Rick going like this, and Olivia's going like this.
Yay! Yes, yay.
So, pardon?
Can I just second that?
I was going to move that as well. Who moved it?
I will third it.
Oh.
Okay, so it's moved that myself and Jane maintain our current positions for one more year. And we have a second. Monica put it, Ernie seconded it.
Do you want to ask if anyone else is interested in running?
We can. Is anybody else interested? Pardon?
Yeah, but the only thing I would say is that I'm not going to be in a position to move into the chair role in a year, just given my, kind of family and professional obligations. So that's the only thing I would say is that, if somebody else is interested in taking the chair role in a year and would like to do the vice chair role to kind of, learn the ropes, as it were, just want to put that up there.
I'm actually very hoping that we spend this next year getting a full community advisory committee and skilling everyone up as much as possible so that the next elections could in fact include representation from all of the parts of our service territory that have not been represented in over a year.
Yes, that would be good.
How many spots do we have open right now?
Right now we have 2.
Is Brenda still on it?
Nope.
Plus the alternates.
Yeah, 2 plus alternates.
When do I get to be off of it?
I think you have one more year, Monica, but we can double check.
All right. Can't go anywhere.
Okay, we had a motion and we've had a second. I put it out there. Is anybody else interested? I'm virtually certain, Monica, you don't want it.
No, thank
You're
you.
asking when you're going to be off. No? Okay.
No, not me. I don't want it. No.
Okay. Hearing none, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Very nice. Member Eldridge.
Yes.
Member Franch.
Yes.
Member Landry.
Yes.
Member O'Connell.
Yes, I think I'm not quite sure what I'm voting for, but I think I'm voting to extend the chair and invite and co-chair.
You are.
Point of order. It's 10:05. Just
I know. What? You guys wanted to make that motion exact. I'm putting it back on you. All right.
So, Member Pacheco.
Yes.
Member Padilla.
Yes.
And Chair Sutter.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Motion passes unanimously.
I am looking forward to the next year of working with Jane and everybody else. And I know Stephanie is going to be working to try and get us the full complement. Nick, I will say this, that I was hoping that Stephanie would let Dan Kalb know, to let you guys know, we have to get these folks going. We have to start getting a full complement, or else you're not going to have a CAC at some point, because we're not going to be able to make quorum. Any other CAC member and staff announcements? Rick, did you have one?
Other than 10 o'clock is very late to be having these meetings? No.
Okay. Anybody else?
I want to thank you, Mary and Jane, for your service in the past year. I think both of you are doing an excellent job. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yes, thank you. It's a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to second that motion. And I'm also going to call the question on that motion.
Call the question.
We already
does
voted,
anybody have
right?
anything else? Any other member?
Just as a quick announcement for anyone who is interested, the City of Oakland is holding a vote tomorrow night for the Equitable Climate Action Plan that is moving forward to City Council, that actually strongly works with EBCE in a lot of its planning. And the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has put out its last round of public input surveys to look at ways to integrate public transportation, which also strongly dovetails with electrification efforts and greenhouse gas and particulate matter and NOx and SOx emissions reductions. So if people are interested in that, please contact me.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none, we are dark next month. There is no August. Our next meeting, official meeting, will be Monday, September 14th. Have a good August, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks all.